This week, we were privileged again to observe something that is relatively rare in the history of nations. We watched the peaceful transition of political power from one president to another. In a nation as divided as ours, it is remarkable to watch a president from one party voluntarily leave office and a president of a different party take the oath to be inaugurated. This is one of the marks of why America as a political structure is exceptional in the history of nations. Let's talk about that today. The first time I ever remember hearing the phrase American exceptionalism was in the 1980s under the presidential administration of Ronald Reagan. It is a phrase that is often misunderstood because particularly critics of America and leftists in particular, they often charge people who use this phrase that America is exceptional. America is different from the nations of human history. They say, oh, that's just you think America is superior. American exceptionalism is not the idea that Americans are somehow inherently superior to all other peoples. In fact, it's not really about Americans as individuals at all. The reality is the Bible tells us that human nature is the same across the spectrum. And so what that means is Americans are no less likely to sin and potentially to do horrible things than any other nations of people in all of history. We go back to the nations that were purged from the land of Canaan during the time of the conquest, and we say these nations were depraved and their cultures were marked by horrific behaviors, and yet we can flash forward to the modern era and find those same kind of behaviors in modern cultures. American exceptionalism is not a phrase that implies Americans are inherently superior as a people. What it refers to is that the American experiment, the political structure that our founding fathers built to start a new nation, literally to start a new nation from scratch, it is exceptional in that it accommodates the flaws of fallen human nature with checks and balances and safeguards so that we can avoid what so many other nations have experienced throughout history, the violent overthrow of one government to be replaced by the next. There are nations right now in this generation who go through the ruse of elections, but they are elections that always have a predetermined outcome because the system is designed to be operated by those who have and maintain power at all costs. America is exceptional. They are the exception. Now, from a biblical standpoint, it's important for us to talk about this because as we begin a new presidential administration, I think it's important for us to recover this idea of American exceptionalism because there is a very biblically founded, Christian-focused aspect of that exceptionalism. Now, that's part of why some critics are upset about it because they think that American exceptionalism is an attempt to create sort of a Christian nationalist empire. There was a time through the Middle Ages where Christianity and secular government, there was no such thing as secular government. Christianity and government were two sides of the same coin. That's what we call historically Christendom. The American experiment is not, despite the leftist boogeyman of Christian nationalism, the American experiment is not an attempt to merge government and religion so that there is this Christendom approach where everything is subsumed under a kind of theocratic rule. That's exactly what you find in places like Iran. But that is not the American experiment. Rather, here, our exceptionalism is the result of the fact that there are elements of the American political structure that are unique, not in their individual elements, but unique as a combination of elements that produce this nation and the way that it's operated. Now, over the course of almost 250 years, our nation has tinkered with the original system. We've changed elements of the Constitution. And frankly, we need to quit viewing ourselves as smarter than the Founding Fathers, and we need to figure out how to get back to the original way the structure works, what makes us exceptional. But I want to review with an eye to a biblical attitude. I want to review just precisely what it is that makes America exceptional. Again, it's not the inherent superiority of our people. It's that we have elements that in combination make our political structure absolutely unique in the history of nations. First of all, and I say this without apology, the United States was founded as a Christian, mostly Protestant nation. Now, that throws people for a loop right up front because they think that arguing that we have roots in a Christian worldview somehow compromises this separation of church and state, which itself has become almost an idol in the minds of secularists. But the reality is, it's not about putting Christianity as a formal religion. What's significant about the Christian roots of America is the kind of Christianity that was behind the founding of our nation. And here's what I mean. There have always been Roman Catholic and Orthodox Christians in this land. In fact, the colony which became the state of Maryland was named Maryland. It was explicitly a Roman Catholic colony. So there have always been those elements. But if you go all the way back to Plymouth Rock, what you discover is that the Puritans abandoned Europe and made their way to the New World. And what is most unique that they brought with them was not just that they were Christians, but that they were Protestant Christians. And that means they essentially practiced a kind of Christianity that Catholics and Orthodox Christians, and for that matter, Anglican Christians or Church of England Christians in Great Britain, they practiced a kind of Christianity that was foundationally different from other types of Christianity in Western civilization. The difference is Orthodox Christianity, Roman Catholic Christianity, Anglican Christianity are all top-down governmental structures. There is a pope, there is an archbishop, there is a patriarch, there are structures, and the instructions flow from on high down to those below. What was unique in the American experiment is the religion that took root here first. Certainly it was Christianity, but it was a particular kind of Christianity. The Puritans that landed at Plymouth Rock practiced a bottom-up form of Christianity. That is a congregational rule. In fact, they pieced together what was called the Mayflower Compact. Now, what's interesting about the Mayflower Compact was it made provisions for everybody in the community to have a participatory role in the way the government, the local government would operate. Now, certainly they were English citizens in those early days, which means that they were subjected to a top-down government from England in the big picture, but in the local expression, they governed themselves like nowhere else on earth. Part of what makes America exceptional is that our heritage is certainly Christian, despite what secularists try and argue. But it was not just any kind of Christianity. It was a Puritan/Protestant Christianity that established a government of the people. You see, that was a biblical value. That was a theological position long before it ever became a political position. It's a pillar, if you will, of what makes us exceptional. Besides this sort of bottom-up congregational style of church government that eventually is rebirthed as a political form of government, we also have the fact that America was founded on the basis of common law. Common law is the concept, not that law comes from God through the king and then is pronounced by some sort of divine right. Common law is the idea that law is built by the Creator into the hearts of men, and we recognize those common values, which then become the parameters, the boundaries, the defining characteristics of the way we relate to one another within society. Now, biblically speaking, this also is a Christian value. Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 15 say this. It says that, "For when Gentiles who do not have the law," meaning the written law that the Jews had from the Old Testament, "when the Gentiles who do not have the law instinctively perform the requirements of the law, these, though not having the law, are a law to themselves, in that they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience testifying, and their thoughts alternately accusing or else defending them." In other words, part of human nature is this awareness that the way God created us in His image is He put into our souls a conscience which recognizes a fundamental standard of right and wrong. In Hebrews chapter 8, the writer of Hebrews said, "After those days, declares the Lord, I will put my laws into their minds and write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." In other words, we didn't have to have a king to determine what was right or wrong. We didn't need a dictator to tell us right or wrong. There is the assumption that the understanding of right and wrong is generally recognized as a common bestowal of truth to all of humanity. Now, we have laws and we have law enforcement and we have those kinds of things because the broken human nature that is characteristic of all of us is that sometimes we break the law. We do what our conscience tells us is not right. So there has to be external limitations on that behavior, but the exceptionalism of the American experiment is this recognition that law can be assembled by the common understanding of people created in the image of God. So you have a bottom-up representative kind of government which comes out of a biblical culture, and you have this idea of common law, an understanding of what's right and wrong because of what's already built into our lives. Also a theological position. Now you take that and you add to it a free market economy. And this gets a lot of criticism. People who say, we should be socialist. The free market economy damages people, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is, the Bible teaches us a kind of economic model which both builds in safety nets for the weakest among us, but preserves human dignity by expecting an ethic of hard work and participation by the full community in producing the economic benefits for the nation at large. Again, this is a biblical viewpoint that was then birthed into a political experiment. Part of the reason why we are exceptional is because we have these fundamental theological affirmations. The idea of common law, of a free market economy, and the idea of a government by the people, a bottom-up government. These elements are tied intimately to a theological position, a biblical tradition. The way that I can make that case is 20 years ago when we first attempted to implement democratic government in the nation of Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein. It didn't work well. Why? Not that they couldn't understand a free market economy, not that they didn't understand the idea of common law or be able to philosophically grasp this sort of bottom-up form of government, but they didn't have the Christian worldview that theologically provided the foundation upon which this political experiment rests. That's why America is exceptional. Because as brilliant as our constitutional republic form of government is, it is not easily transferable to other nations without the Christian biblical foundation that undergirds it. So here's the thing. America is not exceptional because Americans are somehow intrinsically superior. We are exceptional because we have promoted a creed of human equality based on human dignity for all people. Again, the very ideas presented in the Declaration of Independence flow out of a biblical worldview that undergirds this thing we call the American experiment. Frankly, I find it interesting when people accuse Christians of being exceptionalists as though that's a bad thing, because it seems to me that leftists and progressives are unwittingly some of the fiercest exceptionalists to be found anywhere. What do I mean by that? I mean that there are people who demand total equality. They are demanding these progressive goals of equal outcomes and our attitude toward the environment, and we have to save the world and blah, blah, blah. Ironically, the people who have this idea that America should lead the way toward perfecting human life on earth, they are the most zealous exceptionalists to be found anywhere in our culture. Why? Because they have this idea that there is something about us that means we should lead out in the rest of the world. And they demand that we rise to a level that no other nation rises to on all of these issues. Well, the fact of the matter is we should be a leader, and we should be an influence and an example for the whole world. But it starts with an understanding of precisely why we're exceptional. We're not exceptional because some people want us to quit using plastic straws, or they want us to eliminate gas vehicles. We are exceptional because there are some theological affirmations, some biblical positions that undergird this thing, this political ideal called the American experiment. If you want equality, if you want to raise people out of poverty, if you want to see America become a nation that sets the pace for raising the whole world out of where they've been, it ultimately is that we have to be the nation that doesn't minimize individuals like most dictatorships around the world. We understand that all persons are created in the image of God, and they have equal moral value and equal dignity. With that recognition, we can say we have a system that will help improve the plight of any other nation in the world. But before we can export constitutional republicanism, we have to be sure to export with it the underlying theological assumptions of the right of men given by God to be involved in the process of governing themselves, this idea that we have a free market economy because of a biblical understanding of human responsibility to work and contribute to society, and this idea of common law, that law is not dictated from on high, but it is placed by God in the hearts of men. And we find this common understanding as a defining characteristic of what it means to be a law-abiding, rule of law kind of nation. We saw the peaceful transition of power this week, and that is always an exciting thing to watch. But don't forget that it's not because we have figured out how to do politics better than anybody else. It's because we have the Word of God undergirding the very structure that makes us different. As Christians, Don't run away from political conversations. Help reshape them around the truth of where our political ideals came from. They came from the Word of God. This is Truth Currents.